Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for your kind participation. This is the eighth webinar on LEI, and this is the final webinar for this webinar series. And we have panel discussion. Like the other webinars, if you have questions, please type in the Q&A box. We will have a Q&A session later, so hopefully we can take your questions and we can make a discussion. So for this webinar series, as you may recall, first, we had the introduction session, and Stephan explained the entire structure, the governance structure of LEI globally, how LEI is governed and how LEI is issued. And then in webinar 2, we learned the experience from United States. Leanne and Amy explained. So Leanne explained how U.S. Customs is currently thinking the introduction of identifier to the custom operation, and Amy explained the usefulness of LEI for financial institutions. And then webinar 3, we had speakers from ECB. Francois explained the authorities' perspective, how LEI should be implemented in the various financial regulatory reporting. And Guillermo explained from CETA's view, particularly the how in a fraud prevention, how LEI can create the benefits in the non-financial sector. And webinar 4, Mr. Vasu explained the kind of systematic approach by the Reserve Bank of India to introduce LEI in the financial sector, and not just the OTC derivative reporting, but various financial transactions and the reporting, and how the implementation can be supported. Arun explained, Mr. Pandey explained how this implementation can be supported in India. And then Ms. Feng and Mr. Zhang share the cases in China. Also, China is taking kind of very systematic approach and very good coordination among regulators, financial authorities, to implement LEI for cross-border transactions. And LEI is going to be widely used various cross-border reporting. In addition to that, Mr. Zhang explained as a financial certification authority the usefulness of LEI for various transactions, particularly in the financial sector. We need to ensure the trustworthiness of website and the transaction. So this LEI can create a benefit, large benefit for the financial industry. And Oswald and Hans explained the LEI use case in the trade, and particularly cross-border transaction, LEI can create a huge benefit. And this is not just in Asia, but also kind of a global trend. And expanding the use of LEI in trade certainly expand the use to the non-financial sector. So that was this webinar 6. And webinar 7, the last webinar, Nurashiqin explained the Bank Negara Malaysia's approach, how to introduce LEI in bond transaction to identify the foreign investors transaction. And I think this is going to be the trend in ASEAN. So other ASEAN central banks may follow the same direction or same kind of implementation. And BNM is really showing the model case for those central banks. And I explained the regional approach, particularly focusing on the FX regulatory reporting standardization. We can create a benefit. And LEI can be important identifier in FX reporting. As I mentioned, normally FX reporting has the common data elements. Of course, the systems reporting procedure are different by jurisdictions, but the elements to be reported to the regulators are quite similar. Entities, transaction, the reason for the transaction, transacting amount. So hopefully we can come up with some sort of more standardized approach. So through ISO 20022, by sending a cross-border message, automatically those information can be transferred to the authority's database. So this is probably the future direction. And this is very much in line with the G20 initiative. Hopefully we can discuss through today's panel session. And today, we will have a short presentation by Tagai-san. He's the ISO 2022 Registration Management Group convener. So he will explain briefly the role of RMG and also the future direction. And then we will have the panel session. And also, of course, after that, Q&A. So with that introduction, I'd like to start the today's panel session. So I'd like to give a floor to Tagai-san first. So Tagai-san, please.
Well, thank you, Yamadera-san, and thank you very much for the ABMF and GLEIF for inviting me to participate in this panel with so many distinguished speakers. It's a great honor. I've been with the ISO 20022 community for over 10 years, and I've been staying very closely with the ABMF. And and through that journey, eventually, since this April, I've been elected as the convener of the ISO 20022 Registration Management Group, which is a group that technically it approves new message proposals that come into the over 700 message repository. So if the community needs to develop a new message, they come to the RMG looks at it, and if there are other ways to develop that message, we provide guidance. If it's brand new and if it's global, then we approve it, and then the development starts. But I think half of you are securities depositories, central banks, and also practitioners in the securities space, where in this region, most of the CSDs and central banks have either announced or adopted ISO 20022 messages in their security settlement format and for cross-border purposes. So the aim for me today is not to preach the converted. I'd like to talk more about implementation. Because as Yamadera-san mentioned, we will be talking about implementation in the past. Now, as policymakers, if you get the word of use LEI or LEI is mandatory, or we request to use LEI, if that's already in a regulatory order or an action, that could be implementation, mission done. But the real work starts from there when you start to implement a particular data element in your systems. And when it comes to ISO 20022, it's really about lining up the data in the right way and making sure that the data can talk to your internal systems. That's where the real work starts. And so for us in the private sector, implementation is not just about understanding what LEI is, but also understanding how it integrates with other parts of your applications and how it integrates with your clients' data and all that data ecosystem. So that would be the gist of my story. I'll start from giving you some insights on what goes on in the mind of an implementer. So if we could turn on to the first page, please. This is just, let's go back. Okay. And so this is what really comes in the mind of an implementer. The first 3 bullets, you're just really finding an excuse how to say no to a new proposal. Is a client asking? Is it regulatory mandatory? Why do you have to do it? And after all those decisions, then a firm comes to prioritize its investment budget. And then if you make the cut, you make the cut. Often the case is that standardization may not immediately be on the top of the list. So you tend to ask things like, oh, because the regulator says so, oh, because it's a regulatory requirement. And you tend to be seen as following a trend. But I think in the world of digital transformation, as we are facing, making sure that you have the right data, very, very well defined, high quality data in the right structure so that the machines can read it. That kind of thing should become a higher objective. Today, we don't have that higher objective. And I think we are in search for something that really improves data quality for the entire. And I'll just try to explain what I'm doing with ISO 20022 in the next page, where the ISO 20022 registration management group, can we turn to the next page, please? Yes. So the ISO 20022 RMG was born in 2004. It's well, 17 years old. And by 2020, we now have 700 plus messages. So we have payment messages, we have securities messages, we have FX messages, we have derivatives messages, we have card and retail messages, and we should have more. We happen to have 700 plus. And being the first vice convener, being the vice convener from Asia for a long time, and being the first convener from Asia, I thought I'd ask all the members of the RMG about what they see for the opportunities and how we should go forward, and how to make ISO 20022 a standard that is globally applicable, rather than people trying to adapt to something that was developed in Europe 15 years ago. And so we're talking about many things. We're talking about standardized API calls and resources. We're talking about interoperability. And the key message is that ISO 20022 is the beginning. ISO 20022 allows you to automate processes. Once you have the data structure that ISO 20022 asks you to have, then you can start the real work, which is automation, which is providing value reporting, which is providing better data analysis for your clients. It could be something related to data discovery, which could lead to sustainability reporting in a way that we did not realize, or in many cases, as we see in the derivatives space, it's really about providing the right data so that regulators can focus on the analysis and point to very well focused policy decisions. And what I'm trying to state here is, what is the North Star? And the North Star that I state is that it should be high quality data in the right structure. That was what I used to say maybe up till about April or May. But what I'm adding now is that it really has to solve for real life problems. And it has to work on behalf of the underlying businesses, which means that the underlying businesses have their clients, and these high quality data in the right structure needs to solve for the real life problems of the underlying client. So how does that work for LEIs? And what is the story? So if we could turn on to the next page. For the payments business, we thought LEIs was something that was invented because the derivatives people were not even able to identify their counterparties. When Lehman went bust in 2008, what happened was that everybody tried to look through SWIFT big codes, and there were so many surviving Lehman entities, and there were so many Lehman entities that were put under administration. And nobody could make out in real time which Lehman entity they could trade on and which Lehman entity they should sort of stay away with. And that was the real incentive, or maybe the start of the LEI journey. But when it comes to payments, recently, if you talk to the payments business person, they would say, why do we have to do this? Because you know your client, you're sending payments to a pre-registered client. Why do you have to do this? So we're always looking for a good story that drives the implementation, drives the LEI story to the top of the list rather than the middle of the list. And if you talk to the payments people about what is the largest real-life problem that you're facing, everybody will say it's cybersecurity and fraudulent payments. And so there, these slides were provided from a working team that works across public and private sector in Japan. The link is towards the bottom, where currently there's a proof of concept in progress, where the Japanese team and the European team, also facilitated by GLEIF, are trying to work for a particular solution using LEIs, but it does have like a butterfly effect. The background is business email compromise. Your email, your employee clicks a particular email, a link on an email, your system gets infiltrated eventually. Your invoices are faked and the payments are diverted somewhere else. And it's a huge problem because last year the supply chain has become very complex. Everything was shifting. And if you got a phone and say, hey, I'm your new supplier, you got to send me this payment by the end of today. Otherwise, we're not going to send you anymore. And a lot of these fraudulent payments are starting to exponentially grow from the last few years. And we're working with the European Union to include LEI for corporate reference numbers. And if we could move on to the next slide, the way it works is that this EIDAS approach is really electronic verification of an invoice. And so the verification entity sits between the buyer and the seller, and also sits amongst the buyer's bank and the seller's bank. And it can show you whether the invoice is valid and whether the issuer is authentic. And it does show you which local operating unit has registered, had issued that particular LEI. And it does have background information that talks to whether this payment bank should associate it with that issuer and so on. So it adds the safety and certainty for the payments to be made. And if we go on to the next page, this is the, let's say, a mock-up demonstration that GLEIF has helped put together. In reality, if everything's automated, you wouldn't be looking at input screens, but you can obviously confirm what the invoice is in the system. You can click on the invoice to confirm who the issuer is. Once you click on the issuer, you can identify the issuer and further drill down to see what the corporate profile is within the registry and such. There was another demo page which showed that you could also validate the financial statements of the particular issuer of the invoice as we developed a add-on to the Google Chrome browser and such. And just quickly on to the next page. This is actually my last page, so we can go to the panel. But for possible next steps for Japan is that we would want to kickstart the legal analysis with our EU counterparts. It has to be technically feasible. And Japan is heavily invested in the ERP and TMS community. So we want to make sure that everything works smoothly for our corporate clients and such. In parting, why this solution is good for everybody is that for those of you who are on the second session for this panel, my colleague Amy Tabia introduced how JP Morgan acts as a validation agent and leverages on existing KYC steps that the bank has already taken on behalf of a new client onboarding, thus leveraging all that information and asking the new onboarded client to say, hey, by the way, you can get your LEI free. And so that was more like a leveraging on what the bank already does and spreading the LEI to our corporate communities. This particular step works well for the banks as well, because in fact, the corporates, the one that has to pay the invoice or the one that issues the invoice really needs the additional trust. And you're not going to lose any extra money by having this. You're adding trust to the system. And the material was provided from the Japanese board member for GLEIF. His name is Mr. Nakatake. But what Nakatake-san mentioned was that, well, the real effort in the implementation team and the working team with the Japanese government seems that 80% of the efforts are really the corporates, really being enthusiastic about it. The remaining 20%, it's the banks. So it seems to be a real win-win solution, because in all these efforts, there seems to be a lot of finger pointing to the banks about the banks having to do more, but it's great to have that partnership. And it's also good for the banks to understand what is happening in the corporates. So once the banks are in this discussion, they really start to understand why the corporates need this, what kind of data integration they're looking to do, if banks can provide better information to the corporates. And I believe that these underlying corporate to bank cooperative work can really drive the adoption of ISO 20022 as well, because if the banks know that the granular data structure will help their corporate clients interact within their systems better, it will drive better adoption. And at the end, banks are driven by clients, also by regulators, not just data quality. So that's my story. But overall, I only just wanted to say that you just can't have banks or industry implement something because a regulator says so or a clearinghouse says so. You really need to help the industry develop the right story, a good use case, so that everybody feels really empowered to spend the money to invest, rather than having to justify the investment. So thank you very much.
Okay, Tagai-san, thank you very much. Well, in the panel session, we will discuss the following 4 topics. Due to the time constraints, let me jump into the first topic: implementation through financial institutions. And I'd like to invite Stephan. Well, the GLEIF, you explained the structures and also the LEI issuance process. And I believe the registration agent, the validation agent, these are sort of the function the banks may be able to play, but probably they wonder how they play the role in LEI governance structure. So can you explain a little bit more how banks can play an important role in this LEI structure?
Thank you, and good morning from my side as well. Good afternoon. The implementation of the LEI system, when it started in 2012-13, had the registrant seen as the one that provides the data, but also pays a small fee for getting the LEI and everything else. And this was mainly driven, or entirely driven, by regulatory mandate. And that created a system, the LEI system, that comes with a cost footprint. Then we looked later in developing our strategy into other industries or other organizations who might do the exact same thing. And it is very obvious that banks, through all the regulation in KYC, AML, and so on and so forth, have to do a lot of background checking on legal entities themselves. So you had 2 systems, one on one system on one side was the LEI, and the other one was the bank itself with all of their procedures and everything else, which are probably even going much further than just the background check, with almost identical steps. And our first thought was, can the LEI help to ease the burden for banks in their KYC process? Could they rely on the LEI? And it was very clear from the beginning that this would not be possible, since regulation made it very clear that the banks are legally liable for every damage caused by using the wrong information in this area. And so they couldn't rely on the LEI as a sole source of information. They used the LEI, it is helpful, it speeds up processes, but it wasn't possible to use it entirely. And so we turned this upside down and said, if the banks, which are trusted by themselves through regulation and regulator overview and supervision, if the banks could be involved in the issuance of an LEI, maybe we can benefit from the KYC process to cut costs to the LEI system the other way around. And this is the idea of what we call the validation agent concept. The bank still works together with an LOU, but uses its own KYC procedures internally to verify and validate the data from a registrant. And then the LOU does not have to do the same validation again. And that's how you take the cost out. And the banks can play a very important role in this. And I just wanted to highlight, we're just about to publish a story where we use this concept in Africa for financial inclusion of SMEs in Africa, together in Zimbabwe with the NMB Bank. And it turned out to be a very beneficial model, both for the local economy as well as for the banks, helping their clients to participate in global trade and payment flows.
Yeah, thanks, Stephan. Well, I'd like to next ask the Tagai-san. You just mentioned that the importance of LEI and also kind of a proactive engagement of financial institutions. But since you've been involved in various international fora and the discussions, I'm just wondering that, you also follow the G20 discussion. And one of the first initiatives is kind of establishing a dialogue between the public and private sector to sort of enhance the cross-border payments. Based on your experience with those sort of international discussion you participated, I feel that probably you have kind of a more strong observation of how regulators expect a financial institution to do more actions. And can you share some of your observation for your financial sector colleagues?
Oh, well, I mean, the cross-border payment space is really the opportunity, because I would say it's still unstructured and it's going to be structured. So there is an opportunity, and I have many thoughts around the current consultation that's taking place. But I think it's a really strong statement that the G20 and FSB are making, that the public sector and private sector should work together to tackle this problem. The problem being that cross-border payments are seen to be too slow, too expensive, too opaque, less accessible, and all that stuff. And probably each of the payment practitioners believe that the things are becoming better and better and better, but we do need to work to change this, let's say, perception. But it's a monumental start. And well, I wouldn't prescribe solutions at this stage, but I would say that it's great that we can start to work without waiting for a disaster. We don't want to wait for like a Lehman crisis to happen, but maybe we are already in the midst of a disaster where so many fraudulent payments are flying around. And the reality is that nobody measures when and where a payment starts and where it ends from an end user perspective today. The service provider can measure from their point, and each service provider is different. So there are many longer term things that we can do. And in the longer term, being convener of the ISO 20022 RMG, what I can see is that having the right reporting structure aligned with the transaction data structure could help in the data gathering and the measurement in the future. So I'm sort of looking forward to see how the ABMF suggestions on FX reporting could work with this. because the other thought is that the ISO 20022 payment messages today are largely bank account based. So we do need to start efforts to develop messages related to wallet payments, related to payments against the digital assets, or even atomic PVP settlement. All those messages have to come into play. Otherwise, there's no way you can comprehensively capture everything. So it's a start. It's a very big start, and it's good to be able to start. That's the only thing that I can say at this stage.
Thank you. I think this G20 action and recommendation roadmap is a kind of a strong message from the public sector. Often we discuss whether LEI should be implemented from top down or bottom up. Well, actually, although the mandatory requirement is probably still on the OTC derivative, but this G20 action is actually drilled down to the some sort of the requirements. And as Stephan explained, banks can play a role or important role, and actually that would benefit the customers. So I think making further action by financial institutions, I think this needs to be seriously considered, although the implementation needs to be expanded. But I think that is important sort of a message we should consider through this G20 recommendations. Well, next, I'd like to move on to the topic, the implementation through the financial regulation and the importance of interagency coordination. And I'd like to invite Mr. Vasu and Mr. FENG to share their experience. First, I'd like to ask Mr. Vasu, RBI. Again, I really have to say, I really admire the RBI's kind of systematic approach, starting from OTC, expanding gradually, starting from a big transactions to the small transactions. And often the case, I think in this kind of a systematic implementation, expanding in implementation, the enemy may be within the institution. I mean, often the persuading the colleague is not easy. And I really would like to know how you successfully persuaded and how you can get the support inside within RBI. What's the approach? That is my first question. Mr. Basu?
Thank you very much, and a warm hello to each one of you from my side as well. It's very important that the message comes from top down. Just a mention was being made a little while before about how G20 and FSP are all discussing about the use of LEI and the different aspects for which the LEI could be put to use. So when our top management, they also attend these meetings, so they do have these ideas, and when they come back, and it's a message from the top that says that, yes, we also have to implement LEI. So when that message is clear, then it doesn't matter, I won't say enemies, wherever your friends are all dispersed, we can always put them together and try to implement. For example, as you were mentioning, we have the OTC derivatives, the non-derivatives, we have the credit markets, and we also have the payments markets. Within Reserve Bank as well, they are all dispersed across different departments which handle these responsibilities. So once a nodal department is there, which can actually guide the implementation of LEI, and the other departments can rally around and take up this implementation in their own, whatever they feel is right, and probably graded, phased manner, etc. They can decide, but it gets uniformly implemented across these markets. And just to mention that we normally come out with a vision document every 3 years. And in the vision document for 1921 also, we have mentioned about the use of LEI for, say, cross-border payments. So it becomes easy to implement when these vision documents get acceptance at the top itself. And you are right in saying that the feelings that we have towards LEI may not be the same across other departments as well, but so that integration has to be organized, and meetings have to be there. We have to convince, and we have to get things done. And the implementation is like important, not just within the institution, say RBI or central bank. It also needs to be implemented by other regulators as well. So we do have to have that coordination with other regulators. Thankfully, there are those fora that are there. For example, we have Financial Stability and Development Council, FSDC, which is chaired by the finance minister, and all the governors of all the regulators, the chiefs are all members of this. And we also have a subcommittee of this FSDC that is chaired by the governor RBI. When these issues are also discussed, say when we look at financial stability aspects, it does give credence to the use of LEI, not only for collecting data, but internally for monitoring also. So across different regulated institutions in the forex markets, the GSEC markets, money markets, capital markets, insurance markets, pension markets. So everywhere when we start using the data, actually when we see the players, many of these big players are present in all these sectors. To have a cross-regulatory view or the entire financial sector to give you a full functional view, it is necessary to have a single identifier. And this is where LEI scores. We do know that everybody has been comfortable with multiple identifiers, but over a period of time, when we see that the institutions are the same, so it is also better to have a common identifier. So this aspect also needs to be sold to the government as well. So we do have to have interactions with the government where we can tell them that multiple models are there, but LEI has emerged successful, and especially when we are going to go cross-border, it does help to have some harmony in terms of use of identifiers. So we do interact with the GLEIF team led by Stephan. We also have a lot of interactions in the Regulatory Oversight Committee of the LEI. So we do get to know how it is being implemented in other jurisdictions as well. So that gives us a strength to know that, yes, we are also somewhere in this space. We can also set ourselves high targets and perform better so that we become benchmarks for others. So when we introduced the use of LEI for payment messages, I was told by Stephan and team that probably we are the first in the globe. So that gives us a push, and hopefully we will have more such avenues for implementing LEI thanks to the interactions that we are having now. Thank you. I'll stop here. Maybe when the questions are there, I can pick up something more as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Basu. I'd like to ask Ms. FENG, People's Bank of China. You also made a good coordination with other agencies. What was the kind of a success factor, or what was the difficulty when you make a coordination? So can you share your experience, Ms. FENG?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. We recognize that coordination among regulators is quite important because in China, in the financial sector, we have this separated regulatory mechanism where there are regulators for the banking, securities, and insurance sectors differently. In fact, long before we started to push forward LEI agenda in China, there was already a mechanism in place for the financial regulators in China to cooperate. We have a superior authority above all the financial regulators. It is called the Financial Stability Commission under the State Council of the central government, and the office of this commission is set up in the PBOC, and all the financial regulators, including PBOC, CBIRC, CSRC, and also SAFE, are members to this commission. So we make full use of this well-established mechanism to mobilize other financial regulators to form a synergy to promote LEI in each of the financial sectors. And the second is that the commission was at a higher level of authority, and also at some of a lower level, we also have a well-established platform. It is called the China Financial Standardization Technical Committee. This is a PBOC-led committee focused on developing financial standards, promoting the implementation of technical standards such as LEI and also UPI, UTI, other derivatives identifiers. So the committee is a open-ended and sort of financial institution friendly framework for the financial sector to discuss and to develop financial agendas on the financial standards. So the financial regulators and also major financial institutions, including banks and the securities companies and insurance companies, clearing houses, payment and settlement institutions are all members to this committee. So we also promote LEI on this committee to not only target to financial regulators, but also to the market players as a whole. And these two mechanisms played a very important role in our efforts to promote LEI. That is from a mechanism level, and also in the bigger picture, the background is that the Chinese financial market is opening up rapidly. And I think a key factor driving us to promote LEI, not only from a regulatory perspective, but also on the part of the financial market players, is that we increasingly recognize the value of LEI in helping us to identify market players, not only in the financial sector, but also beyond the financial industry, particularly the role of LEI in the identification of the digital identity of parties engaged in cross-border transactions. I think the inner value of LEI is what really drives us to go forward with this agenda. That is my answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fan. I suppose, as Mr. Basu mentioned, I think a good understanding of the top management is really important. And of course, to ensure the interagency coordination, some sort of a superior body. I think these days, many countries have kind of macroprudential coordinating body, and the recognition of LEI as a key identifier to ensure the macro financial stability. I think these recognition through those interagency coordination really creates the foundation of a cross interregional implementation. Basu, you may have a comment?
No, I just wanted to also mention the point which was being made earlier about the quality of data. Here, the importance from the top about, let us say, how we implement. For example, to say that no lapsed LEIs for anything will be considered. That means the importance to renewals is very much there right at the beginning. And when we say no LEI, no reporting to the trade repository, no LEI, no payment messages. So those messages from the top are very, very clear when we implement. Because sometimes it might be like thought of as implementing for the sake of saying that we are also doing this. But actually the importance is to say how much we give validity and criticality to the data, to the quality of data, to the completeness of data, and the data corroboration activities, etc. So that becomes very critical, and we also have close engagement with the LOU here to tell them this is what we are planning to do, and how is your capacity in terms of issuance of more LEIs. How do you actually take steps to corroborate the data, both level 1 and level 2? How do you compare yourself with other LOUs? So we do make them engage into these activities. So the quality of data also becomes so critical. And that's what I said, a good guidance from the top always helps us to actually revalidate whatever is the implementation process, albeit the process will be phased and gradual, but as and when we do, the quality of data cannot be compromised. Ultimately, that's very, very critical. So I wanted to make this point additionally. Thank you. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah, good understanding of the top management, also the determination by the top management to make a good quality data. And because that eventually leads to the financial stability, I think that's quite an important point. Thanks. So let me move on to the next topic, the implementation beyond the financial service. Actually, again, LEI is important for financial stability, but the implementation, merit of implementation should also go beyond that. So first, let me ask the Mr. Zhang. Your role is to certify various data for financial sector, but your role as the China Financial Certification Authority may go beyond the financial industry or even the small, medium-sized entities. Can I ask your prospect how you try to sort of include these non-financial institutions under your business scope?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Satoru Yamadera. And as we know, the LEI firstly introduced in the financial markets and implemented in the financial reporting. But as the LEI issuance number is increasing, we have the condition as to extend the LEI application to more bigger scope, such as the small and medium-sized enterprises, makes the LEI is more inclusive. However, the LEI implementation in the non-financial markets is different from the financial markets because there is no mandatory or such a regulation. There are less disease in the non-financial markets. So the logic we seek the implementation LEI in the non-financial maybe a little different. The first one I think is the value for the SMEs. We know we just know to give LEI to the SMEs, as we still need some added value as to the SMEs. Maybe the digital identity or the e-voice and the e-contracts, just like this is the package together is to deliver the value to SMEs. For example, in CFCA, we have a e-contract platform, and during last year, we totally have over 4 billion e-contracts signed on this platform, and most of them are SMEs. So if we embedded the LEI in the e-contracts or incorporate the LEI e-contracts, we can give the SMEs a value as to beyond the identifier. This is the first approach maybe we can take. And the second is about the ecosystem, because the number of SMEs is very large. For example, in China, there totally are over 100 million SMEs. They covered 90% of the market share of the enterprises, and contributed over 50 the tax, and over 60 GDP contributed by the SMEs. So many SMEs are already in some platform, just like the e-commerce platform or the online platform. So if we cooperate with the platform is to push the LEI, maybe a better way is for them to adapt in the LEI. Because the platform, we know they have the self-governance roles, and that is the ecosystem, as there are so many participants, and such as the sellers and the buyers, the service providers, and just like these entities. But the third I want to mention is the cooperation, because we know the LEI maybe has a property just like economic world, that is a network effect. That means if there are more LEI issuers in the world, and there will be some more demands about the LEI. So this is a question just like the chicken and egg question. So for the first stage of the to push the LEI SMEs, we need the cooperation, especially in the cross-border cooperation, just like the ADB or such organizations can play a very important role in this process. So if the counterparty you treat, for example, has a LEI, and they can use the LEI to do business with the domestic business identity. So for the SMEs in China, he has LEI, maybe do business easier or efficiently with that partner in the cross-border system scenarios. Yes, this is my view. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. I think, as you mentioned, expanding the use case for the SMEs, I think the trade could be important. So I'd like to ask the question to Oswald. You are in ICC, so you know various countries' discussions. So particularly the trade, as US Amy sort of explained that the US is considering the implementation of LEI, but do you see any similar movements in other jurisdictions, particularly the customs implementation of LEI or global identifier? Could you share your observation?
Thank you so much, and it's an absolute privilege to be with everyone today. I want to touch on a little bit of what some of the previous panelists said and then answer your question directly. So firstly, when we think about LEI and we think about businesses, you have procurement, spending money, you have your sales and making revenue, and then you have your internal organization constantly trying to optimize itself. And what a few of the panelists already has touched on this notion of the importance of quality, reliable, verifiable data. And I personally, myself, struggle to think about many use cases of value in your supply chain or within your trade side that doesn't need legal entity identification in a trusted, reliable manner, so that whether it's automation for productivity, whether it's reporting on these new ESG objectives, etc., or whether it's extracting additional economic rent from customers by showing the investments you're making into their products. So I think it's massively valuable and it's foundational at its core. On your question of what are we seeing when it comes to LEI adoption, etc., I'll answer it just briefly in 3 key stages. The very first is, and a few people have mentioned the G20, but I think it's also important to mention in the G7 declaration, a lot of people saw the model law for electronic transferable records portion of the declaration, but the first 2 components of the declaration was all about how do we build resilient ICT infrastructure and how do we deal with standards. And in the last month alone, we've had 2 countries from the G7 actually reach out to us to have conversations specifically on LEI and the use cases associated with that. What we've also found is most countries ask, well, what can they do? And a lot of people focus on the regulation angle, but it's also actually talking about, to your point, customs and LEI and actually how we can integrate there. The second one I'll share is also when it comes to the production of standards. So you have what government and government agencies can do, but I think the second one is through standard setting organizations. And we see these new standards coming out through DCSA and BIMCO now working on a standard for title documentation, OASIS working on standards too. And I think it's important, this is where we can bring the business community along the journey by ensuring the LEI is incorporated into the standards. It's not just at a government level, but it's also at the standards for producing or production of the content that flow through our supply chains is equally important. And the last one that I will mention is our fintechs. And so when we think about our fintech community, one of the most successful fintechs in the space that does publish their numbers have about 60,000 companies that use them for international trade purposes. And so when you think about 60,000 compared to the almost 2 million LEIs that we already have today, it just shows you how well Stephan and the team has actually positioned GLEIF and the amount of members there. So I think as much work as we're doing with governments and as great it is as it is that they are pulling on us, and as much work as we're doing with the standard setting authorities to ensure that LEI is within them, both the formal and the informal, it's also an opportunity for us to work with the fintechs. And you'll see that both in our identity management guide at ICC, but also on our DSI website, we have identity management right top and center with the LEI, because again, when you're a fintech, the value of being able to trust the identifier and the other system is very difficult unless you use something like GLEIF and LEI. So long answer, but it's an inspirational answer because we do see the movements, and we do see the movements on both three of those arenas. Thank you again for the question.
Thank you, Oswald. Hans, well, I don't want to put you in a difficult question, but you know, the Commerzbank, the banking. So you are the one, you know, all the merits, and you are the one to promoting the LEI, but still kind of a slow movements. And I'm just wondering that what will be the key driver? And I hope that you can add a few more sort of actions that we need to think. Hans, floor is yours.
I just had to manage to unmute myself. Thank you for giving me that opportunity. I'll be very brief in the interest of time. If I look at what the LEI could do for the financial industry, I'm surprised that there is reluctance in adopting it, and that the banks have not been pressing a lot more on the adoption of the LEI among their customer base, because for the financial industry, the prospect of having a clear and globally unique identifier for the entities that they're dealing with is so great. And you may think you don't need to sell that. Just look at many of the points have already been mentioned today, but just look at KYC. KYC is an extraordinarily expensive process that imposes a high hurdle, a high bar to take up new customers. The world is kind of craving for a better solution, which keeps data in a kind of centralized way, in probably a decentralized structure. That would make KYC an order of magnitude cheaper, and the data quality probably also an order of magnitude better. You don't need to sell that. And as Stephan Wolf has already mentioned, there is that problem about liability. And I think this needs to be fixed in the interest of all participants. The verifiable LEI as a digital identity offering is supporting the digitalization efforts that all banks should undertake, and that all banks or financial institutions are actively thinking about. The management, and we've said that in this session before, the management needs a general understanding of the development of this network of networks, and that would help in bringing things or utilities like the legal entity identifier a lot further and accelerate that development. The LEI can support in so many ways, support transparency, so help to further goals like fraud prevention, help to build better risk models, or help to relate data across different networks. So you know exactly which legal entity certain data points pertain to. Banks should therefore become VLI issuers. They should promote this digital identity among their customers. And this would actually be a service to these customers, since also in our customers base, and I think you can generalize that for other banks as well, in our customers base, the know-how about what digital identities will do and can do is still can still be increased. And once people know more about it and the power behind it, they will start to invest in these areas. So I see our role as becoming an issuer and disseminate or make sure that our customers use the verifiable LEI. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Hans. Well, I guess everybody understands the merits, but still we need to have some sort of the critical mass, and that is still the challenge. And trade, also the one of the area, the customs, of course, financial regulators, but one other area can be also taxation. And actually, ADB is now trying to create a regional platform to bring all Asian tax authorities together. And today, I also brought the my colleague Miura-san. He's supporting the regional discussion among tax authorities. So I'd like to ask Miura-san, what's the ADB's role for this regional tax hub? And also, is there any interest among the tax authorities to consider LEI for their operations, tax information? So Miura-san, floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak. Perhaps let me start my intervention by quickly touching upon the issue that revenue authority and the tax authorities currently face in this region. So domestic resource mobilization, or DRM, will continue to be a major strategic priority in the aftermath of COVID-19 for developing countries in the Asia and Pacific. And now is the time for countries to review and begin to plan initiatives to enhance DRM. The great efforts to strengthen DRM will require enhanced domestic tax policy and tax administration reforms. Now, these reforms would include enhancing tax compliance with improved risk management and making tax administration more transparent and efficient with the investment in the digital technologies. And in terms of the legal entity identifier, or LEI, if I'm not mistaken, it connects to key reference information that enables clear and unique identification of legal entities participating in the financial transactions. And by receiving a huge amount of information and data with the high quality and accuracy, the authorities may strengthen its capacity to evaluate risk and take appropriate steps. In this regard, I believe that LEI would be beneficial to tax policy and administration agencies, as it will contribute towards evidence-based policymaking and compliance risk management. And therefore, in my sense, tax administrations would be interested in LEI, especially when they plan to enhance their tax compliance. But on the flip side, there might be some challenges that those agencies would face. These challenges may include the lack of sufficient digital infrastructures in tax authorities to accommodate massive information and data, but also lack of proper legislative basis for handling such data. In this regard, digital transformation or digitalization of tax administration would be a hot topic or kind of driver for their consideration. As you may recall, the pandemic has accelerated digital transformation of the economy, and the tax authorities are finding themselves on the front lines of rapid and intense digital transformation. So for instance, when they start embarking on the transformation, perhaps most of tax authorities will have to consider whether their legacy systems should be completely renewed and replaced or not, as it will contain much vital data and will need to be properly brought forward into the new system. Furthermore, they will also need to establish proper legislative basis for digitalization along with procedures, because the security threat is especially high due to the variable and sensitive nature of the information. Therefore, it is essential for countries to develop a roadmap for the automation of tax administration in a strategical manner to overcome these challenges. In this context, ADB has recently officially launched the Asia Pacific Tax Hub at the 54th ADB annual meeting this May. The Tax Hub is envisioned to serve as an open and inclusive platform for strategic policy dialogue, knowledge sharing, and development coordination among ADB, its members, and the development partners. The automation of tax administration, together with medium-term revenue strategy and the strengthening of international tax cooperation, are the key building blocks set out under the Tax Hub to support countries' efforts to enhance revenue mobilization. In this regard, ADB would be very pleased to support its member countries and work closely with its partners to address this important agenda, following on its assessment of the automation with recommendations. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll stop here and back to Yamadera-san. Thank you.
Yeah, Miura-san, thank you so much. So ADB is also making a lot of effort to support the tax authorities, and the digital transformation of our tax administration is quite important still, because one of key complaints from Asian banks to tax authorities is papers. Papers can have a huge burden, and lots of papers are flying just to ensure the double tax treaty privilege. So hopefully we can move to the more sort of a digitally managed tax administration, and our team and Miura-san's team will closely coordinate. Well, in terms of the role of regional cooperation, I really would like to ask the question to Nurashiqin. Well, I made a proposal because I think it is important to have kind of a tangible output to create the benefits. Then people can really move, and also we maybe create a kind of a next step how we can implement LEI. And I'm just wondering that, you know, from your perspective, how ADB should coordinate different authorities, or how this sort of a proposal of standardizing FX administration would benefit benefit the BNM or ASEAN in general. I appreciate your comment.
Thank you, Tomo. I think in my view, I would appreciate if you have done this 5 years ago, before we struggle with the implementation of LEI and segregated account for bond market in our market, because I think at that point in time the familiarity or LEI in our market is very new. It's not there, so I would appreciate if you have done it before. But having said that, I think the idea is great. Investors, from investors' perspective, they will want to leverage on what they have invested for. So in our market, they have already set up a system to be compliance for the bond investment, and if we were to expand to other asset class, I think it will be a cheaper solution for many parties. It will be a cheaper solution for the regulators, for investors, for custodian banks, and also intermediaries. But I think having learned from the experience that when we implement into bond market, I think we have to also look at the practical perspective. We have to be cognizant that existingly countries in ASEAN has already have their own system, which was developed many years already, and using a lot of resources and a lot of costs. As such, I think we have to strike the balance, in order not to get too much pushback. Although we may not want to be too ambitious to go on a full standardized system per se, but we can work on a guide or recommendation. I think that will be a more palatable solution, which then country can choose to adopt at their level best, and how do they embedded that into their existing system. So the end product may differs from country to country, but I think it will help the regulators, the intermediaries, and also the investors to reach there. So I thought I will be brief, looking at the time. So I'll stop there. Thank you, Tomo.
Thank you. And also, well, I think BNM's experience will lead the other countries, and definitely, in any case, the scope of standardization can be expanded based on our discussion. So I very much appreciate VNM's support. Let me ask Basu, because actually the Basu, he's important person in the CPMI and leading the standardization discussion. So Mr. Basu, what would be the role of ADB in terms of regional cooperation and standardization?
Actually, every such organization, every such standard setting body, every such agency guiding regional cooperation, everyone is extremely useful in popularizing the use of LEI and even such issues towards harmonization, etc. I'm sure ADB has what, around 68 members or so, so definitely you can lead many of the initiatives for standardization. Having said so, while we are also engaged, India being engaged with other multilateral regional cooperation frameworks like the BRICS or even the SAARC, and internally also we feel that the cross-border part of the discussions will get greater mobility and greater facilitation when the organizations like ADB take this up. No, it becomes easier to discuss about this because somebody would have already had an exposure. The CPMI and those jurisdictions have probably a fewer number of countries, and these regional initiatives have probably the entire breadth and length of countries being represented therein. So it becomes very useful to have this. And when we also participate in such webinars, it also makes us have a look at the mirror and then see whether we are doing the right things with the other neighbors and etc. So it does actually make us pitch ourselves at the right place. And sometimes I feel that whatever may be the numbers or whatever may be the periodicities with which such webinars are arranged, the numbers are not enough. So more such initiatives need to be there. One thing that needs to be understood by the stakeholders, by the ecosystem, is that it is not a push that is important, the regulators or the government. It is also the demand that is important. If we have more sectoral representatives participating, the actual users of the LEI, in terms of how it will help them internally as well, then the push will actually come up. Sometimes we feel that it's only one person driving the job or one regulator driving the initiative. But if the demand from the banks, the non-banks, the companies who are even not even in the financial sector, if they also look at the use of LEI, I'm sure the world will be a better place. And we don't want more crises to come so that the people will understand the benefit of such initiatives. But having seen one, I always will feel and always tell others that some of the positives that have come out of the previous crisis is the use of LEI. So we should actually nurture it, sustain it in whichever way we can. And you are doing a wonderful job. Please do continue.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. And lastly, I'm conscious of the time, but allow me to ask Ms. Fan, because China is quite an important country, and in our regional cooperation, China is a key member. So may I ask Ms. Fan's observation what ADB should play the role? Ms. Fan? Hello, Ms. Fan, are you still there? I guess she may not be.
Okay, I can try to set a message.
Okay.
Ms. Fan, yes.
Mr. Zhang, yes.
Moment, set.
Mr. Zhang, do you have a comment? Can you give us your observation from China's point of view?
Okay, just wait a moment, and the Ms. Fu is on the other way. Yes. Thank you.
Well, in the meantime, I don't see the questions in the Q&A box, but given the interest of time, I don't think I can take the questions from the floor. But if you have a question, please feel free to send me the question, the email, so I can respond via email. Ms. Fan, are you there? Okay, I guess she's.
Hello, Mr. Yamadera. I just got the message from Ms. Fu. I can give a few comments about these questions, and we hope the IDB can play some important roles in the Asia areas of coordination and the cooperation. We know in the Asian there are so many countries, and the LEI is also implemented by these countries. And we in this series of webinar, we have discussed the application of the LEI in the financial markets and beyond the financial markets, and all these insights and these ideas that need to be take action is to lay down. And in this process, the cooperation in different countries is very important. For example, in our practices leading by the GLEIF, and we now have a project, the mutual recognition for the digital identity with the European. And this in this process, we have so many issues. Some of from the technical and some of from the legislative perspective, and just like this. The one countries cannot solve all of these issues yes individually. So we need the cooperate and to push the whole process forward. In this process, IDB is a very critical role as in Asia, as to can play many important roles in this situation. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhang. Well, I guess of course, IDB needs to be the coordinator, and once FX reporting can be standardized, or we can come up with some sort of agreeable standardized message for FX reporting, then probably we can expand more. Also, the standardized data format, probably then we can move to the next round of discussion, how these data can be exchanged among the authorities, or maybe we can create a more sort of a database to really understand what is happening in Asia. Among Asia, we already have more than 50% of interregional trade, and I think the share will going to grow. The Europe, of course, interregional transaction accounts more than 60%, but Asia is really coming to close. So looking out, getting more information, understanding, I think we can also liberalize the trade, liberalize the capital movement. And these are sort of our aim beyond this standardization. So hopefully this will create more cross-border activities, and also that will ensure the financial stability among the regional through the regional cooperation. So sorry, we are overdue, but I hope that you could learn a lot of things from today's panel discussion. And I'd like to emphasize, this is really not the end of the story. Actually, this is really the beginning. And after this webinar series, we will start actual implementation of LEI through the process of standardizing FX reporting. And I very much appreciate your kind support. Hopefully we can get support, we can get more sort of comments, information, so we can expedite the process of standardization. So then let me conclude today's webinar and the webinar series. I really appreciate all the speakers' participation. Your comments are quite valuable, and this will lead to the next round of a regional discussion. And I hope we can continue to engage and we can solve this chicken and egg issue. We hope we can really come up with the concrete result, and then we can create the real merits, and we can move forward. Thank you so much for your participation.
And thank you for organizing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.